Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Sheila Exchange. As usual, it's 5:30 in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur on a Friday evening. And we're very privileged to have with us today the Matthew Crabbe, the director, or the Regional Trends Director, Asia Pacific for Mintel Group. And he's here to speak to us about consumer trends in a COVID-19 world. Now, everyone's just wondering what's ahead for us. One day we have an MCO, and then one day we don't, and then we have one again. Should we spend money? Should we invest in our businesses? Should we not? Should we keep all our money and not spend anything at all? Where are the trends? As businesses, what should we do? Should we develop our businesses, come up with new products? Is the market ready? Is there even a market for them? So that's what we're here to talk about to Matthew Crabbe today. But first of all, as is customary, we always like our guests to talk a little bit about themselves. So Matthew, tell us about your professional journey that culminated in your current role at Mintel.
Hi Sheila, thanks for having me on. Yes, it's been a long journey. So really, I graduated from university with a degree in Chinese and ended up working for a Chinese language newspaper, originally as a translator. And then I got into writing stories about the then emerging market, consumer market in China. That led me eventually to work for a company called Euromonitor, a market research company. I was brought in essentially to start their series of China reports. I did that for a few years, did a bit of consultancy work for them. And I thought, well, you know, that model was based on a European structure, and it wasn't really suitable for Asia Pacific. So myself and my erstwhile business partner, we set up our own company called Access Asia, and we did that for 13 years. And we focused, well, the name gives it away. We were really looking to sort of cover the whole of Asia Pacific region. But we ended up doing mostly China because that's where the interest lay. So I was writing Chinese reports for many years. And then eventually we sold Access Asia to Mintel about 9 years ago. So again, I was brought into Mintel to write China report, start the China report series for Mintel, and then eventually, after doing that for several years, I took over the trends position, which was a breath of fresh air for me because again, I came back to being able to look more at the entire region and develop, a more holistic look, if you like, at general consumer trends, cultures, ethnography, psychology, all of these sort of things. So that was quite an interesting shift for me, and I've been doing that for over 2 years now.
That's interesting. For our audience, just a little bit of nugget of information about Matthew. He reads and writes perfect Chinese Mandarin, and he also does calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy, quite expert at it. Right. So the COVID-19 pandemic, Matthew, has caused a huge change in the way we live and work. What would you say are the biggest changes in consumer patterns over the past year? I suppose it's almost a year now, isn't it?
It is almost. Well, of course, I mean, one of the biggest changes is that we're all stuck at home for a lot of the time. And that, of course, changes your perspective on things. I mean, first of all, you're not traveling so much. Stuck at home, a lot of people have been faced with the reality of what their home looks like. They wanted to then start thinking about doing it up, making it a nicer environment to live within, particularly for long periods of time. So what they're looking to buy has shifted. Also, of course, people have been concerned about the economic fallout post-COVID or during COVID, as we are still in at the moment. And that again has shifted people's value perception in terms of what's really important for them. And I think at the same time, because we've been getting used to using technology for so many different things, of course, people have been using it more for shopping. So e-commerce has increased, of course, use of social media commerce, so on and so forth. So all of these have come together at the same time and profoundly changed the way people shop, the way they engage with brands, the way they go about the whole process of choosing what to buy. And I think there's also some broader things that have come out of this. the importance of localism and community have been seen across the globe. We've seen trends where people, and you'll remember this from when we saw TV footage from Italy of people singing on the balconies and all that sort of thing to keep their spirits up. So there was this build-up of a sense of community, and we've seen this globally. Also, of course, as people worry about their local economies, they've started to support local businesses. And that's been really important because that's shifted people's perceptions about what's produced locally, why that's important, how that supports their economy. And that goes from manufactured products all the way down to agriculture. I don't say down to agriculture, including agriculture. And of course, people have started growing their own food. And this has risen alongside an increased demand or expectation of better ethics from companies. So the brands that they're choosing to buy from and align with are those that they sense have the right ethical way of looking at the world. That they're there not just to make a profit by selling stuff to communities, but are actually active in bettering communities. Another aspect that we've seen a big shift on is the importance of mental health. And I think that's really been an issue that was already growing, but this has been accelerated by COVID. I think people really were starting to come out of looking at mental health through the lens of a taboo and starting to really think, well, there must be practical solutions to this. And again, that's produced both demand and the opportunity for brands to provide products that help with mental health. And it, could be on the basis of just helping people get better sleep, improving their general well-being, but also things like, we've seen more and more products claiming things like gut-brain axis. So, what goes into your stomach helps cognition, your mental state, that sort of thing. On top of that, as I said, I've already mentioned, the ethical side has meant that people have shifted their value proposition demands in some way. So they're looking for products that give them real results. They're looking for brands that provide better information about the products that are available and what the benefits of those really are. So the consumers are using a lot more scrutiny in the way they decide. So they're looking for more information from brands. Now that's great because at the same time, they're also using more technology. So there are real opportunities for brands to use all of these technologies to better engage with consumers, provide better service. I think that's becoming a big differentiator between brands now, and also better information, better proof. So people are looking back to the experts again. And one aspect of this is convenience, of course. No longer is convenience about convenience stores necessarily, time and place. It's about brands being able to offer more than that. Particularly, you've got the convenience of online shopping. Everybody's got that. But what it is that idea of how brands can help to locate for people the best product for their specific needs. So treating people as individuals in many ways. And I think that, growth in technology has also gone hand in hand with greater concerns among consumers about what's being done with their data and what the value of that data is. So all of these have been sort of big shifts, all have happened together. And I think we're still waiting to see how the dust settles on all of these.
Great. So I'm hearing from what you're saying, I'm hearing there's a lot of focus now on relevance and convenience and information, on authenticity in a sense, right?
Yes.
Now, in your opinion, Matthew, are businesses keeping up sufficiently with the trends in consumer behavior now?
Well, some of course will, some won't. I think necessity has forced agility. And I think essentially in this day and age, because things are changing so fast, any lack of agility means a lack of business, essentially. And we've seen not just businesses be able to pivot very quickly. I mean, a lot of people have lost their jobs and they've had to find a new way to earn an income. So it's in many ways, people have had to tap into that entrepreneurial spirit. Likewise, brands have had to be able to pivot very quickly. Now we saw, many cases of companies switching from producing beer or spirits to producing disinfectants to help frontliners and so on, and clothing brands doing creating masks and that sort of thing. That was great, but this also means that brands have to adapt to the new reality, and of course with the greater use of online, a lot of the companies that weren't selling online have really had to make that switch and get online very quickly. But of course, there's a lot of other people doing that. So how do you differentiate yourself? And that's the real key.
Okay, and so could you give us some examples of some of the brands that have pivoted and really disrupted market segments during this pandemic, to kind of emerge ahead of the rest, local or international brands?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the key aspects here over the COVID-19 period has been, well, if consumers can't come to you, you've got to come to consumers. So a great example of this early on was in-time department stores in China. All of a sudden, they couldn't get customers into their stores and they had to keep paying their staff. So that's a cost with no income coming in. So what do? Oh, well, get those staff to sit in the store and do what they do best, demonstrate the products, but through live streaming. So essentially, they can continue to do their jobs, but actually reach out to consumers. So the switch being that you can still use your store as a place to sort of showcase the products, but instead of people coming to you, you go to the people. And we've seen various different ways that people have used technology to get around that. Here in Malaysia, there's a brand called Healtopia. And what they do, they have this like app, and it basically curates health services online. So you can find different services that you might need, compare the prices, find out how to get those services. So again, it's that curation, if you like, being able to identify what it is that you need for your particular needs. Another great example of using tech that way was BMW Malaysia. Now, what they did was that, so they still launched their latest car, but they couldn't get people into the showrooms to look at them. So they created this augmented reality experience to allow people to look at these cars inside and out virtually. So you can still, sell cars and so on. And we've seen many examples of, for example, estate agents doing the same kind of thing. They go into the apartment or house, do a 360-degree video, and people can watch the video and decide to buy or not. Another one was a line of clothing I saw from Malaysia called Dawn Adaptive. And I thought this was great because this is an innovation that didn't need to be created during COVID-19, but happened anyway. I think this was about in June. They launched a line of clothing that was adapted to people with physical impairments. And you think, well, why hasn't somebody done that before? So again, what we're starting to see is that because of the need to reach some consumers in some way, people are actually starting to think about those groups of consumers that were being ignored before. We're seeing a lot more of that as well. Another great one was, coming back to the whole value proposition, was My Burger Lab. So at some point, I can't remember exactly when this year, they launched these compound value e-vouchers, which essentially means that the longer you hold on to them, the more value you get. And a similar sort of thing we saw in Thailand, where a supermarket chain there gave people coupons, 30% off, 20% off, 15% off, and they could choose which products they put those coupons on for which they would get the discount. So they kind of almost gamified it as well. And we've seen this sort of, this whole thing with the live streaming as well. Tesco in Thailand, for example, were live streaming cookery programs to show how their products could be used in different recipes. So again, it's not only adapting and selling, but it's also making it entertaining.
Interesting, because Matthew, I personally am a person likes to go in and try things and see and touch and feel things. And this whole pandemic has been sort of like a pivot for me as well in terms of shopping. You know, my family says, look, order stuff online, but I'm the type of person that even to go to the market, I like to go and feel the vegetables and look at the color and see whether they're firm and fresh and all that.
Of course.
So we've all had to change our way of doing things and, you know, get onto digital platforms to get our essentials and so on. Now, when this pandemic passes, if it ever passes, you know, do you think that this trend's going to be here to stay, or would people, you know, slowly go back, you know, like after an apocalypse, go back into the shops and sort of, you know, go back to old behavior? What do you think?
Well, I think after an apocalypse, there probably aren't any shops left, are there? I think a lot of the trends that we've seen emerge during COVID-19 were not just out of the blue. I think they were accelerated trends that were already starting to happen. So because they've accelerated, they come to the fore, and I think they will last. I think certain things are universal. I mean, if you're going to stay in business, you need to continue to come up with products that people want. How do you do that? I think the best way to do is identify a pain that consumers have and give them a solution. You know, products really essentially should be offering results, as I said before. I think brands also need to think really hard about how they use technology to get engaged with people in new ways. You know, everybody will jump onto the live streaming bandwagon. You know, they've been doing so for the last few months. So then, you know, the question will be in the future, rather than just jumping on live streaming and selling products as you have been in the past, what are you going to do next? How are you going to differentiate yourself from other brands? And I think, again, you know, there's opportunities there to sort of gamify it, make it entertaining, make it different from what other people are doing. But I mean, one of the trends that I mentioned before was this whole thing about people sort of seeking more ethical companies. And I think, again, that was something that was emerging. We saw there's a group of 100 US listed companies last year decided to form a grouping whereby they were pledging not just to be for profit, but also to be for the community and sustainability and so on. And I think increasingly brands are being looked at through this ethical lens. And I think it's important for them to wear their ethics on their sleeve, talk about their mistakes. Don't just talk about what you've done well, but, you know, talk your customers, your consumers through your mistakes and how you intend to make them right. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, this year we've also had the Black Lives Matter thing. We've had the demonstrations in Thailand. And I think, you know, brands really have to confront those social issues rather than shying away from them and offering solutions to communities. I think this it's again, you know, a way for them to adapt their message to highlight the results of not just their products and the benefits their products offer to consumers, but you know, what their business offers to the wider community in terms of, it could be corporate responsibility, of course, but, you know, thinking about, you know, who are our suppliers? You know, what are the businesses that our business supports? Talk about that. You know, if you're in the food business, talk about the, you know, the people who are supplying you with the raw ingredients for your product, and talk them up as well. So make it more of a collaborative community kind of thing.
Okay, so if you're you've sort of just talked about the consumer trends for the past for this year.
Yeah.
And you know, so moving forward, what do you think are going to be the key drivers? Because we don't seem to be seeing a light at the end of this tunnel, and tunnel seems to be going on and on. So, yeah, what do you think would be the key drivers for consumer behavior? What do you think consumers will be looking for moving ahead into the next year?
Well, I've already touched on mental health, but I think that, you know, that whole idea of well-being has shifted up a key. Mental health, yes, absolutely still, but I think that's just part of a more holistic health. You think about the number of people who've gone into, you know, fitness, meditation, all of these sort of things, thinking about hygiene as well at the same time. So all of this has had an impact, and it's not just about yourself, your family, your home, but people are starting to think about well-being in terms of the economy, the environment, and so on. So sustainability is going to be a big issue. We know it's already an important issue. It's, I think, going to be much more on at the front of people's minds in the future, globally. And I think that will really start to become a lot more important in Asia Pacific, particularly. And I think, you know, all of these sort of broader sort of social problems often come back to sort of lack of equality, lack of sustainability, waste, that kind of thing. And I think, you know, people are going to be looking for brands, not just to be ethical, as I said before, but also to be agents of positive change. So again, you know, when you're launching a product, what's the benefit for people? You know, rather than just talking about, you know, I'm going to make lots of money off this new innovation or whatever. And I think, again, there's that opportunity for brands to look at how they engage with their the communities that they work within, develop things in terms of how they work with their suppliers, their customers, how they engage with them, how they talk to them, how do they talk about their supply chains and how they're improving those. And also, I think, you know, sort of just using technology better in many ways. I think, you know, social commerce is going to be a big one, you know, shifting from online platforms more towards social media commerce. But at the same time, I think online platforms will also shift towards a kind of social commerce, social media type of commerce in the future as well. We're already starting to see that. So that, you know, in many ways, that is part of a bigger shift where, you know, retail was always about experience anyway. But that experience didn't really exist online. Now we're starting to see that demand for an experience in terms of online shopping. And again, that's another great way for people to engage with brands, for brands to sort of not only talk about their ethics, but show what they're doing, show why their products are good, why you know, there's the value in their products, and also in terms of their business model, why there's a value to the community in that sense.
So that's interesting what you're saying, because, you know, in the past, we've had many brands, many companies just going out there and talking about what they're doing and what they're offering. But from what you're saying now, people are very interested in the why
Yes.
Of your business, and not so much in the what and the how, unless but they want to see that the how is, you know, with operating with transparency and integrity and authenticity, and that you can trust the process. So the whole supply chain, they want to be looking at that and seeing that there's something authentic and clean about that. So, yeah. And those are going to emerge as the brands that, you know, are at the top.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, during COVID, we've seen people, to start, they didn't really sort of wear a mask, you know, that sort of thing. They weren't going through the social distancing and so on. But very quickly, people sort of started naming and shaming each other. And that extended to brands as well. And I think, you know, there's that shift in mindset amongst consumers. They're saying, well, look, you know, if you're not doing the right thing, I'm going to put you out. And I've got the power of social media to sort of make your life hell, really. And I think, you know, that empowerment has been interesting. So, you know, it's not just that the big tech companies own all of these platforms that we use. But, you know, ordinary consumers can actually make a real difference by using social media to sort of highlight what they disagree with that brands are doing. So, I mean, I think, you know, this is one of the reasons I say that brands really need to sort of engage with consumers on their ethics, on their sustainability, on why they provide real benefit to communities. Because if they don't, and they do things wrong, then they're starting from a very dangerous position. Whereas if you're having that conversation or in an ongoing way with consumers and with your community you're working in, if something goes wrong, then you can at least say, yeah, okay, need to correct that. But you've got an ongoing conversation. It's not like all of a sudden you get in the PR firm, sort of, you know, the walls and shutters come, you know, walls go up, shutters come down, PR guy stands out front and takes the black. That's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Matthew, because in the past the modus operandi has been to, like as you say, shut the walls, close the gates, and then get someone up there to give them some spiel and spin doctors and all that. But today no one's buying that anymore.
No,
They want to see the real brand, the people behind the
correct.
brand, the philosophy, and so on. And I think that's something that I'm seeing, and also from what you're saying, that it's easier for smaller brands to go and be more authentic, because you still got the people who start their brands there,
Yeah,
and their spirit and their values are shining through. But I think, in a sense, correct me if I'm wrong, bigger brands, bigger organizations, they really need to go back and rethink their strategy in that respect.
well, yes. I mean, obviously, one of the things that in order to stay ahead in business, you have to keep innovating, especially now because the world is changing so fast. So therefore, businesses have to remain agile. And that's one of the advantages, I suppose, that small businesses have. Not only are they agile, but they've got that closer connection with their customers and the communities they work in. And in order to survive, they have to keep innovating, coming up with new ideas. Now, there's a ground where those small companies and bigger companies can meet. We're seeing many more large companies develop these innovation incubators where they help small brands to actually grow because they see a potential. Maybe somewhere down the line they could buy that company and add it to their portfolio, whatever. But that's not necessarily what they're always doing. I think they're looking for the ability to sort of invest their money, because a lot of these large corporations have huge amounts of money, and being there essentially to sort of create new brands, new innovations that might spin off ideas that come up with a solution for bigger problems. And we know this whole region is very innovative. I remember reading stories this year about, for example, there's a company in Indonesia that had worked out a way of extracting protein from seaweed to create bottles that you could then throw in the sea. It would dissolve, and in fact, fish could eat it. So again, it's finding those solutions to the consumer pain points, the problems that the existential problems that face us. Everything from what do we do with plastic straws, all the way up to how do we deal with climate change. And then again, even large companies can't do that by themselves. They don't have the ability to pivot quickly enough. So there needs to be a reliance, which is why I think it's so important that companies reconnect with communities and localize as well, and have that proper connection with their local communities, and not only sort of sell to them, but sort of collaborate with them. I think that, that opportunity for collaboration is definitely there. And that can bring in government, it can bring in different levels of corporate, banking and investment. You can be your manufacturers, your transportation companies, your retailers, but also the small innovators as well, who are sort of coming up with new ideas. I think there's, it's about really building those relationships. And by building those relationships with the community and showing people that you're doing that will excite people. That will make them think, right, so this company really does get what we need. Okay, they're still selling, their core product, but they're also looking to invest in developing our community, helping our economy to grow, taking the good ideas that we've got and actually accelerating their development. So I think there's an awful lot that both small and large companies can do to really develop that more positive outlook. I think is the key thing, rather than just doing as we've always done, but actually start to think, well, what do we want our future to be like? Let's paint a picture of what that future can be like.
That's interesting. So it's, in a sense, co-creating the future through collaboration, collaborative sort of ventures. Interesting. Matthew, coming back to the scenario in Malaysia, do you think our companies, Malaysian companies, are doing enough of that, or companies based in Malaysia are doing enough of that?
I think they're starting to, yes. I'm seeing a lot more innovation happening. And I think we just need to join the dots a bit better in Malaysia. I think in many ways there should be more routes, avenues for communication between small startups and large corporations, banks, as I said before, the infrastructure, whether that's transportation companies, retailers, government, so on and so forth. I think that it's opening up those communication channels will be really important. And again, you look at sort of politics around the world, there's so much polarization. We need to get past that very rapidly. Otherwise, we're not going to get anything done. We don't have the time for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. But looking at the current scenario here, for example, interesting that you said that we need to find better ways to connect the dots. Putting the politics aside, what can corporate Malaysia do? What can organizations, big and small, SMEs, MNCs and so on, what can they be doing sort of on their own now, be initiating in order to connect those dots?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, in many ways, a perfect model for that kind of communication hasn't been created. So that could be the first step, is saying, right, well, what are the goals? We've heard the Malaysian government talk about sort of, the next step in developing industry, moving towards more mechanization, use of robots, artificial intelligence. Great. So who's innovating in those spaces in Malaysia? And there are companies innovating in that space. But I feel that they're still innovating in isolation, in silos. And I think we need to sort of make those connections much faster. So for example, if you're a food producer, and you want to sort of up your game by sort of bringing in mechanization, robots, whatever, into the production, go out and start talking to people developing those kinds of technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence to sort of monitor systems, whether it's robots on your factory floor, whatever it might be, because it's happening elsewhere in the world. You look at countries like China, they're having a huge push on that kind of thing. So in order to compete with that, you need to be sort of reading the weather forecasts and looking at other countries. That's the kind of collaboration that we're already starting to see around the world. It's going to be an important factor here too. So you might as well take a lead on it. I think the first step is deciding what's lacking. What are the conduits you need to build for that communication to start?
The bigger companies are sort of in a position, they have the resources perhaps to set up their, innovation incubators, to go out, have these conversations and seek and partner and so on. What about the smaller companies, Matthew? What sort of advice do you have, micro sort of businesses? What advice can we give them to sort of capitalize on the opportunities that are out there? Because as you know, their resources are limited. So what can they be doing? Where can they be looking at in the market to sort of move into or start a business? Because as you know, there are a lot of people out there who are sort of a bit out of pocket, they've been retrenched, they've been let go and so on, and looking for something to start. How would you even propose that they, start, and where do they start?
Well, I think if you're going to do any business, you got to look at what your strengths are and recognize what your strengths are and say, what am I actually good at? What do I do well? Start from there, and I think then the next step is really to start doing it, and then see how it goes. Start small, sort of build up a small business, a small network, and if it works, go online. Get it broadcast, and the opportunity to broadcast yourself is available to everybody through social media and so on. And I think that's the key area where, again, perhaps small businesses have an advantage over large businesses. Is they're hungry for success. They're hungry to sort of develop new ideas, to innovate, to come up with something that hasn't been found before. And I think the example I gave you earlier is sort of a good example of that kind of thing. And it doesn't need to be complicated. One of the other examples I remember from later on this year, actually, quite recently, was there's a company, I can't remember the name of them. They started an online delivery service for women who had just given birth. So they've gone into confinement and they wanted really nutritious food for their confinement period. And a service like that didn't exist. Come up with one. There's an opportunity. Again, it comes back to sort of, what do you cuss not existing? What is it? What are the products you think, I need something that does this and it doesn't exist? What are the service that you'd love to have that you can't get? That's an opportunity. If you've got a need for it, somebody else probably has a need for it. And if you solve that problem and it resonates with enough people and you shout about it online through social media, that's a great way to start building a business.
Excellent advice. Another question. So we've got these people who, are good at something, go inside, go into that and start. What about businesses like medium SMEs? They're already existing, but business is slowed down. They can't, take their products across borders. They've come to this almost standstill. Where do we go from here? What advice, do we have for organizations like this?
Well, again, I think it's, in many ways, it's thinking about, okay, we've reached this stage with this product or this range of products. That's already met a need. What else can we do? And I think, again, because you've just been producing one product and that's been successful, the problem is you start to define yourself as, oh, we do this. Sometimes to survive in business, you have to say, no, what we're about is our idea, our value is this. Now, whatever fits in with that value, we can get involved with. Now, think about, say, for example, think of, I know they're a large company, Air Asia, they couldn't fly planes. So instead, they started selling their in-flight meals online. Brilliant. Okay. So that's an example essentially of, okay, we can do this. This is what we've been doing. We know that works, but let's take that a step further. Let's think about what else we could be doing with the resources that we've already got. So it could be, for example, likewise with the AirAsia example, shifting from a service to a product. You could be doing it in the opposite direction. So, right, our product is this. Let's say it's instant noodles. Well, how can we turn that into a service? Home delivery, fresh. It could be bespoke. Choose your flavor. There's all sorts you could be doing there. And again, I think if you've still got the contact with the consumers and understand what it is that they're looking for and their pain points and the services or products that they lack, then you can step in and meet those demands. So I think again, it's thinking about innovation from the perspective of the consumer. Think about what they're thinking, what they're looking for. Ask them. Simple as that, maybe.
I think that's absolutely fantastic advice because I'm a proponent of design thinking as well, and it's all about going back to what the market, what the consumer wants. As you've said, consumer trends have really changed over the past year and are likely to sort of go on developing and evolving. And we need to be constantly, as businesses, keeping up to date with what our market segment want and maybe even what not our market segment, the people who are not in our segment, because that might open up new business opportunities for us to venture into, and it might even mean pivoting our business model totally.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. This has been very enlightening, very interesting, very exciting. Actually, you've sort of just given me heart to go out there and look at what my non-market segments want, and to look at possibilities out there. Thank you so much for being with us. You have been listening to Matthew Crabbe, the Regional Trends Director, Asia Pacific for Mintel Group, speaking to me, Sheila Singham, on the Sheila Exchange on consumer trends in the COVID-19 world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sheila.